And so I would love to go ahead and start our 2020 virtual panel discussion with our summer undergraduate research students. For those of you that are on the line with us today, thank you for joining us at 3:30 in the afternoon on a glorious Friday, at least out what I see outside my window. I am Clue Hansen. For those of you that do not know me, I am the director of the Summer Undergraduate Research Program and the coordinator for undergraduate research and creative inquiry here at Western Carolina. And it is my distinct pleasure to host and moderate this panel discussion with our wonderful student participants this year. This is a brand new ball game for us, so please forgive us for any technical difficulties that we may encounter. We are learning the ropes as we speak. So to start off, before I allow our students to do a brief introduction of themselves, I would like to note that while we are engaged in the panel discussion, we would ask that folks who are not speaking to keep their mute buttons on so that we can keep down any of the secondary noises that tend to take place in the background. And if you would like to use the chat feature, please do so. Dr. Granger, she is going to be moderating our chat while we host this panel discussion. So as I said, we are coming together here October 16th, a few months past our usual summer proceedings with a symposium for this program. But what I would like to do is kind of set the stage for our proceedings today. This panel discussion is really designed to be a conversation, an exploration in learning about the students' experience in the summer program and what they were able to learn and advance in their projects. And so as guests on this panel discussion today, I would love for you to understand that when we use the term research, we are really using that term as a catch-all term for the really intensive scholarly activities and investigations that our diverse students participated in this summer. And when we are talking about this very intensive scholarly activity our students participated in, I want y'all to understand that these students became experts at discovering and advancing new knowledge in their disciplines. And these projects that they worked on have real impact, not only in their specific disciplines, but as you will hear hopefully from some of our participants, how their work impacts our region and impacts people's lives. And I am exceptionally proud of these students because they really had to blaze a new trail with us this summer and in this virtual experience. Because we did have to do this entirely at a distance and online. And for anybody that knows, doing this real in-depth scholarly activity is usually not something you can do at a distance. Being face-to-face is the preferable way to do it, but they rose to the challenge, and I am just honored to be able to moderate this discussion with them today. So let's go ahead and get started. What I would love for us to do is go ahead and introduce our panelists. We are breaking the panel up into two separate groups today. Our first group is going to be comprised of Justin Clifton, Sarah Wallace, Anastasia Hillsgrove, Matthew Roos, Daniel Hammer, and Blair Watts. And I would like for, and I'll go ahead and name us again, but for each of our first series of panelists to do just a very brief introduction for our audience. I'd love for you to introduce yourselves, your year in school, major, your faculty mentor, and your project title. So Justin, I would like to start with you. You're at the top of my list.
Hello, so my name is Justin Clifton. I'm a senior computer science and mathematics student. I worked with Dr. Mark Budden over the summer, and I believe the title was Hypergraph Ramsey Numbers. And we studied exactly that. We were doing research in the field of Ramsey theory. And the general idea of that is to take some original structure and partition it, and see if we can guarantee some property in the partitions of the structure. And we were working with hypergraphs, which is a generalization of standard graphs. And those numbers are actually really notoriously difficult to find. And thanks to our research, we actually produced quite a few new bounds. So,
Thank you, Justin. Sarah?
Hey guys, I'm Sarah Wallace. I'm a junior here at Western. I'm double majoring in marketing and management. You guys probably saw from the page on the SURP site. This summer I work with Dr. Lamb and we researched if consumers actually care when a company causes an environmental disaster. For this, we used the 2010 BP Deepwater Horizon oil spill, and we mainly focused on the stock market responses and consumer survey. I really like this program. It was super engaging, and I'm really thankful I got to participate. So thank you guys.
Anastasia?
Hi, my name's Anastasia. I'm a senior, and I'm a double major in psychology and sociology. I worked with Dr. Gordon, and my project focus was on terror management theory. So my study compared the effects of an increased awareness of mortality salience versus an increased awareness of self-esteem enhancement. And my study also compared an explicit versus implicit measure of attitude. And we found that mortality salience versus self-esteem enhancement did not have different effects for either explicit or implicit measures. So, yeah.
Thank you, Anastasia. Matthew?
Hey, my name is Matthew Rouse. I'm a senior, super senior, whatever you might call it. I'm an English major. I have a minor in Spanish, a approved program in Cherokee linguistics, and a certificate in teaching English to speakers of other languages. And I was working under the direction of Dr. Rainey Brake, who unfortunately I don't believe can be with us today. Might be. But she has been in physical therapy for an injury that she got recently. And so we were working on Cherokee ethnobotany project. So studying the Cherokee uses and names of different plants and fungi and other life forms found in nature. And we were trying to find different patterns and try to figure out just a bigger understanding of why certain things are named in certain ways. And that involved bringing in other sources from other languages of other indigenous cultures, which may have had some impact on some of these names. And I actually have found that it seems very likely that there have been. And it's been a very fun project to be working on and to still continue to sometimes work on.
Great, thank you, Matt. Danny?
My name is Danny Hammer. I am, I think, a junior or senior, somewhere thereabout. I worked this summer with Dr. William Kraling in the Math and CS department. The title of our presentation was Operating Systems in the Rust Programming Language. We looked at taking a course that is taught here at Western and translating the coursework into a more improved and more efficient programming language to see the benefits of that and we will continue our study in the spring semester, seeing how well students take on this new language and how they compare to improving security flaws that exist by using other older languages.
Thank you, Danny. And last but certainly not least, we have Blair for this first round.
Hi, my name is Blair Watts, and I'm from Whiteville, North Carolina. I'm currently in my third year at Western Carolina University, and I'm majoring in marketing, communication, and entrepreneurship. This summer, I worked with Dr. Bethany Davidson to research how prevention training programs can combat communication barriers between human trafficking victims and law enforcement officers in North Carolina.
Wonderful. So let's go ahead and dive into some of the questions that we've generated for today's panel. Now, we don't expect every student to answer every question simply because of the time that we have available to us, but we are interested to hear from some of you on these questions. So the one that I'd like to start with the most, and I think that this sets the stage for us today having this conversation, is why should we, as an audience, as a collective group, care about your project? And I pose that to anybody who wants to take it from the top.
Because it's high level math and it's cool. No, for our research specifically, I think first of all, just in general, student research is important for a wide variety of reasons. So everyone's topic should be of some interest. For the research that I did with Dr. Button, hypergraphs are actually being found to model the spread of pandemics really well. They model social networks really well. So there's a lot of work to be done for those, and that's for our research.
Wow, I didn't even think about that, Justin. You know, just kind of taking a peek inside of your work and seeing that hypergraph. Now I can kind of see how that networking perspective would play a role in that. Very interesting. Anybody else on why we should care about your project and your objective?
Yeah, I'll speak on that. Well, with Cherokee culture, there's a huge revitalization process and kind of creating, more space for Cherokee culture to flourish as it once did, and obviously not in the same manner. But the study of ethnobotany can be very impactful on medicine, modern medicine, as well as just being aware of what's around us in terms of like ecological conservation, because you might find a certain plant in a certain area, and that might be reason enough not to develop there, because that could mean no more existence of that species.
Wow, I agree with you. The revitalization aspect of your project is truly fascinating. Anyone else?
I can go. So my research is important because since 2007, over 14 human trafficking cases have been identified in North Carolina alone. And in majority of those cases, police were contacted at some point in order to help look into the case. And there has been other research that has shown that there's a disconnect between law enforcement and human trafficking victims, but there's been no research into the training programs that can help combat those communication barriers or remove that disconnect. So that is what my research is focusing on, and it will help law enforcement better serve our community and better help those victims.
Such a relevant topic too of discussion in our current state of affairs too. Thank you, Blair. Okay, let's go on to another question now. I'd love to know what surprised you the most in preparation for this 8-week program. And just to set the stage too for the audience, our students worked full-time for 8 weeks, which is in terms of the research world, they essentially completed a little over a semester's worth of research in 8 weeks time. So it's pretty remarkable. So again, the question is, what surprised you the most in preparation for this 8-week dive into research?
I'll chime in on this. Specifically for our work, since it deals with programming languages and having to translate things between languages, I had to learn this new language before I even was able to begin the research. And in doing so, I found that it had a much steeper learning curve than I had anticipated, and significantly more steep than any of the languages that are taught in the CS program at Western. And that is the consensus among everyone out of the research that I found online about this, which raised a question for us, because if we are intending to teach this as a course at Western, we have to account for that. And that changed a goal of our research down the line in that I had to dedicate about a couple days to a week in preparing new lesson plans and new material for students that'll be able to learn this in a much easier way.
Wow, I think I took that for granted, Danny, that you actually had to learn this language from the ground up. I didn't realize you had to invest that learning into preparation for your research. Well done. Others?
I guess for me, what really surprised me was actually getting the study out there. I was like, oh, it's online. It's already an online study, so I can just send it out to Facebook and Reddit and everyone will take it. That didn't happen. So I think that really surprised me, and finding those outlets of putting my study out there and finding which outlets are the best outlets to do that, and then figuring out actually how to professionally put it out there. So.
Anybody else? Well, Anastasia, I think you actually give us the segue into the next question, which is, how did your project objectives and processes change as a result of the pandemic? I mean, you already mentioned the difficulty of taking for granted this online mentality. So I'd just love to hear if you know, y'all had to really rethink your processes as a result of being in the midst of a pandemic and having to shift everything online.
Yeah, like I was saying, luckily my project was online to begin with, but that doesn't mean that it would be easy. So, and also I had to think about the sensitive nature of my project, because we were talking about death, and so I definitely was like, I thought about how those people would react to talking about death because of the pandemic. So I included that in my when I sent it out, like, this might be sensitive for you because of the pandemic. So I think that catching on to that was very important. I think that more people took it because I was very sensitive to that. So.
You know, I didn't even really think about that myself. You know, I've compartmentalized so much of what we have experienced in this pandemic, and then understanding now your theme with your variables. Now that makes a whole lot more sense. Very interesting dynamic, Anastasia. Anybody else?
For working on math, it was like a complete curveball, because I expected, to have blackboards and whiteboards and to be able to just, have chalk and meet with Dr. Button and talk about these things. And instead, we kind of had to shift to using different technology like Zoom and like Overleaf, which is a way of writing math papers. So it was certainly interesting.
So did you have to learn that new software, Justin?
It wasn't my first introduction to it. I've worked with it before, but I learned a lot. I'll just put it that way. I learned a lot about it working with it over the course of the summer.
So you went from novice to proficient. Anybody else? You know, Matt, I hope I don't put you on the spot here, but I recall in your original proposal that you had anticipated getting opportunity to hold face-to-face interviews. As a result of the change of the pandemic, how did that progress over time? Were you able to conduct those interviews?
No, I was not able to really talk with any speakers who are mostly elder, and because, passing on germs and whatnot. And so I had to kind of skip that part, and I'm still kind of awaiting to really get into that. And that is still a part of the project, which I will do, discuss with speakers about this terminology and really try to form an understanding of, how to interpret these verbs and all the different morphemes that are attached to them. So yeah, that was a little offsetting. However, I was still able to fill up my time with plenty of other activities, so research activities.
Yes, one of those being just advancing that comprehensive data set. You know, how many of your identifications did you add to that data set?
Well, there was the original source which I was pulling my data from, and that is the most proficient source of Cherokee ethnobotany. And then I compiled some other sources that I found, ones that aren't as mainstream or as available. And I didn't identify anything myself to be able to add to that data. However, there is a plant that I am seeking to put into that, but I need to know more information about it. It is a very rare plant, and actually came across it down in South Carolina in one of its only habitats near Lake Jocassee. And to add that to the data set would be amazing, but I just don't have all the data to back it up with. I just have the plant, and I've read in literature somewhere that a certain Cherokee name for it, but I don't know if that's accurate or not. So.
Thank you. All right, so let's shift gears a little bit into the actual workings of your projects. So I'd love to maybe start with you, Sarah, on this one. How did you take your project, which is it seems like a very broad project to tackle over 8 weeks. How did you organize your summer objectives to make advancements?
Well, I'm just going to say, when we started out, I thought that my 8-week plan was going to be 1 week, 2 week, 3 week. It ended up being all over the place. Like, there was one day I was working on one thing, and the next I was like, oh, I found this. I'm going to go work on this. And it was all over the place. I did not follow my plan, but it ended up, I didn't follow my plan, and we ended up with more information, more research to do afterwards. And we're actually continuing our research into the spring because of this. So I think in this situation, it was good that my plans didn't work out. But during the project, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not doing what I need to be doing. I was so stressed out.
Well, I think you speak to the messiness of this process. It's very rare that when you get involved in research, your best laid plans are the plans that actually work out. So I'd love to hear from others in the group on how y'all fared with organizing those objectives.
My experience was pretty similar to what Sarah said. So kind of backtracking a little bit, going to the last question, my project was originally supposed to be in person, and I was supposed to interview people in person, but obviously I couldn't do that. So we kind of had to change everything last minute, which in the moment I was like, oh my gosh, this is so crazy. Like, I'm going to have to change everything. I'm so behind now. But it actually ended up helping me get further ahead of my timeline that I had planned, because instead of doing those in-person interviews, I ended up doing a survey. And because of that, I had to have my questions and everything prepared much further in advance than I had originally intended. So we actually got a little bit ahead, and then we were like, we're doing so great. And then a few weeks later, we're like, we're so behind, we're not doing great.
Well, I love that you had an opportunity to also investigate a different methodology as a result of this, you know, shifting from a qualitative perspective with in-person interviews to more of a quantitative study with the survey. Well done. Okay, so this is a good question, I think, that I'd like to pose to the group now based on our time, but what would y'all say is the most important piece of learning you engaged in while you were involved in the program?
I think that definitely the guests that came in that kind of talked about their real world experiences and shared that with us definitely gave everyone insights about how they can go about their future endeavors. Yeah.
Well, thank you for saying that. And for our audience, just to give you some context to that, we hosted weekly meetings via Zoom with our SURP students to stay connected and build a community. And every week we hosted a professional, either one of our fabulous sponsors or a esteemed faculty member or administrator here at Western Carolina to share their experiences in research and in their professional advancement. So I'm so glad that you found that valuable, Anastasia. Others?
It sounds super simple and like everybody should know this, but most of my research, we conducted it and like documented it through Excel and PowerPoint, like mostly Microsoft stuff. I had no idea. I don't know anything about Microsoft or Excel. Like every time I talked to Dr. Lamb, he was like, so you do it this way and you can add this in. And I was like, how did you know how to do this? Like it was crazy. I've used Microsoft since I was like 8. And I didn't know any of this. I was like, holy cow, I had no idea. It was like a whole new world.
You can come and teach me anytime, Sarah. I need a refresher.
Oh, I still know nothing. I still know nothing.
Anybody else?
I was just gonna point out, yeah, I agree with Sarah. I've definitely learned a lot about Excel and definitely learned Dr. Gordon is incredible at doing Excel. He like knows the in and outs of everything, and I have to go through it like 10 times and be like, okay, how did I do this? And I like call him and I'm like trying to go through it and say, how did I do this? I did this 2 days ago and now I forgot it all. So I think what I've learned is just repeating that same Excel like motion that you're trying to do over and over again, and then it just clicks and I get it. So I think that's like the trick for Excel, at least for me.
Well, I think that y'all are also speaking to the technical expertise of your faculty members and passing on that technical expertise to you. And yes, it absolutely takes lots of repetition and lots of time. And so I want to leave some time to pose any questions that the audience may have to this group of panelists. But before I do, I wonder if any one of you might be able to share very briefly if you were able to close any gap in knowledge. And for our audience, what we mean is that what did you find out in your investigation that you didn't know before?
As a
go ahead,
oh,
Dave.
okay. As an example, a concrete example, the work that we found was in implementing this new language for the class that we are going to offer next spring at Western. We found that the new language was on paper an improvement in every possible way. It was faster, it was more stable, the programs broke less often, they were better storage space, everything. And so everything we did was a complete uptick and improvement. And we're hoping that that will also translate on to further things.
i.e. preparing future Western grads for the workplace, right? Justin, you had a comment?
I was just going to say, for the work that Dr. Budden and I that we did, we found several new results, and we most likely will probably get a paper published out of it. So I think we closed a big gap in knowledge, especially since what we were researching, there's very little work done on. So
yeah, how long has Ramsey theory been studied, just for context for the audience sake?
I think, if not 100 years, close to.
Pretty impressive. Pretty impressive.
Started in the 30s.
Tommy, what did you say?
The initial work by Frank Ramsey was in 1931.
Wow. Well, with that, I'd love to open up the floor to anybody in our audience who might have some questions for our first group of panelists before we shoot for a short break.
Lou, we have a question from the chat.
That would be great, Jill.
Sure. All right, so here's the question. Did the experience convince you that research should be a part of your life going forward?
I kind of fell in love with doing the research, and Yeah, I would love to be able to continue this throughout my life, doing things like this.
I would also second that. In this program and also a previous research program that I have been in at Western itself, made me realize how much I enjoyed research and made me change what I had planned to do after college to be more research centered. And it has also helped me to continue on doing research during this semester too. So I think I'm just going to be stuck doing research from now, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I'm doing more research now, and doing this made me lean a little stronger to going to grad school. So
Yeah, I've been doing research before this with Dr. Byrne for a couple of semesters. So definitely like getting into more research and doing it along with all of the information that we're getting from you guys has definitely made me more excited about research and knowing the ins and outs of what's professional and what's not in research. So
I love like finding the answer to a question that nobody else has figured out yet. That's my favorite part, is figuring that out. I love it.
Jill, do we have any other questions from the chat?
Yeah, the chat is like on fire. So,
Oh, great.
So I have a question that's addressed to Matt Rouse. Matt, we're interested in knowing if you saw a trend in naming based on plant use or the plant features, or some feature that was maybe based on story or narrative.
Yes, so the way that Cherokee names work with pretty much anything, but I'm going to talk on the botany. Most of the plants are descriptions, most of the names. A lot of them are certain features of the plant, certain morphological features. Others are different uses of the plant, whatever is the most salient applicability of that organism. And there are some that are story or narrative based. For example, there's a plant called Kanati, which is the lucky hunter. He was the first man in the Cherokee story. And it is the pitcher plant, which is a jack in the pulpit type of plant. You might be familiar. And that's very interesting. However, there's also a smaller group of plants, well, not a group, but a smaller amount of different plants and organisms, which are named, which have mysterious kind of names. The researchers describe it as opaque nomenclature, meaning that the names do not come from the Cherokee language. They do not come from certain verbs which are used. So that's how I imparted on my research to find, through studying other languages like Tuscarora and Muskogee, Miccosukee, to find where some of these plants might have been influenced, these names might have been influenced from other cultures. And so that's a really, really fun thing.
Thanks, Matt. So we have another question for the group. So if you had to do it again, what would you do differently?
I think I would have had a more detailed plan at the start, because I obviously did a little bit of research on my topic beforehand, but I didn't go like super in depth with it. And so when the 8 weeks started and I started to look more and more into previous research, I realized that there was not much research done on my topic. And so I was kind of having to decide more like what I wanted to do and how I wanted to go about it, and kind of not make up stuff, obviously, but like make up how I was going to go about doing it, because nobody else had done anything like this before.
I would say that if I did this over again, I would take an opposite approach of Blair said, and I would actually spend less focus on my overall plan and focus more heavily on asking the right questions at smaller intervals. Because there was oftentimes that I got stuck on a problem that I didn't know how to solve because I was trying to solve the wrong problem. And if I had just taken a step back to evaluate what I was stuck on and what I needed to accomplish in the short term, it would have made my long term much easier.
All right, Clue, I think we're done with the chat questions for now.
Well, then I would like to just very briefly open it to anybody who'd like to unmute and ask a question outside of the chat, and I'll give it that wonderful awkward Zoom pause. And if we don't have anybody, we can take a brief break and reconvene at about 4:15 to hear from our second round of panelists. So again, if there's anybody that would like to ask a question and unmute, feel free.
Lou, I want to ask one from the our great students here. What was the moment you had like a wow moment during this work, like a very excited moment?
I have one. And Dr. Lamb will agree. We talk about this every time we meet, but when we did a student survey, one of the survey responses, the question was if the student had known anything about the oil spill. And the response was that BP cleaned up ducks after the oil spill. And the thing is, BP didn't clean up the ducks. It was Dawn commercials where they had cleaned up the ducks, but they had made that connection. And that was just the funniest thing.
I
Yeah.
have a question.
Sorry.
What have you learned about yourself during this process, about yourself as a student?
Dedication, commitment. I had found myself this summer having to take a few weeks off. I was in a medical recovery after being viciously assaulted by law enforcement and being blinded and whatnot. However, I was able to overcome that and get right back into my hours, complete them all, even if it meant day in, day out, putting all my time into that. So definitely overcoming obstacles, being committed, being dedicated, and not giving up was definitely the biggest thing I feel like I learned.
Clue, we have another question from the chat. Students, what would you like to tell alumni and donors on what having programs like SURP means to you?
I think these programs definitely give the participants one up in connections and having these networks that we build with people, like such as the guests that came in. We could talk to them, and then we were able to email them later with other questions and then get those connections for future jobs. And I think that's very important for students to definitely get at the start of their academic careers, because I feel like a lot of students are very shy at going up to professors and being like, hey, I want to do research. So I think that it's really important that starting on having those connections and being able to have the confidence to go up to random people and, you know, talk about your research interests or working with them that's very important for future jobs and everything. So
I think it's also important on kind of like the last question. This program really helps you to discover like who you are as a person. It makes you think more in depth about things, not just like research wise. And it also helps students figure out if they want to go to grad school or what they want to do with their future career. So.
And it gives you something tangible, you know, if you, especially, it's an interesting experience to put on a resume, and if you get a paper out of it or something, that's something tangible that you worked on that you can then display to others. So.
Wonderful. Well, with that, then I think it is 4:09 by my count. Why don't we take a brief intermission, and we will reconvene at 4:15 to hear from our second round of participants and a second round of questions. For those of you that are on the line, feel free to mute yourself and your video if you need to go take a break, and I will do the same, and we will see you back at 4:15. Okay, welcome back. By my clock, it's 4:15, so I'm going to go ahead and kick off the second round of panelists and questions. In the second round, we have Kat Smith, Tommy Meek, Matteo Fratar Congeli. I believe I've gotten that pronunciation right. Forgive me, Matteo, if I haven't. We have Charles Wise and Barnes Powell. And so I'd like to start from the top and give them the opportunity to introduce themselves. We'll start with you, Kat. Again, your name, your year in school, faculty mentor, and your project.
So I'm Kat Smith. I'm currently double majoring in criminal justice and forensic anthropology with a minor in psych. This is my second year, worked with Dr. Tasha Houston, and we studied sexual conservatism and emphasized femininity as risk factors for sexual victimization in female college students. We did find that primary caregiver sexual conservatism and student emphasized femininity increase risk for all types of sexual victimization, and there was a relationship between primary caregiver sexual conservatism and levels of emphasized femininity. So we're going to keep on studying that, and we're also looking to expand our research into domestic violence. But yeah, that's the long and short of it.
Thank you, Kat. Very interesting topic. Tommy?
My name is Tommy Meek, and I am a non-traditional student as well as a transfer student from Southwestern Community College. And this summer, Dr. Budden and I worked on a project studying mapping from between hypergraphs. So it's a similar subject matter to what Justin had worked on, but we focused on primarily linear algebra techniques to determine properties of this mapping that we were investigating. And one of the driving factors behind our research was applications in fields such as Ramsey theory, similar to what Justin was studying.
Great, Tommy, thank you. Matteo?
Hello, I am Matteo. I am a third-year student at WCU. I am a chemistry major, and I'm also minoring in physics. And this summer, with the help of Dr. De Silva, we focused our efforts in finding a way to predict how europium-based complexes glow, how intensely they glow. These complexes can be used in many applications. The one we are studying right now is biomedical imaging for specifically for cancer cells.
I thank you for that. And Charles, gonna go to you next.
My name is Charles. I'm a senior, biology and chemistry, and along with Dr. Storm, we researched a unknown protein in Staphylococcus aureus, and we think we know the general idea of what the protein we're studying is. But as we are doing in the fall and spring semester, we're still studying it, and we hope to have a publication about it.
Great, thank you, Charles. And last but certainly not least, Barnes.
Oh, okay, I think you can hear me. Hi, my name is Barnes Powell. I worked on the, it's called the Zalagi-Uweti Cultural Resources Mapping Project. Basically, I utilized the unpublished field notes of a late 1800s anthropologist named James Mooney to basically find the old Cherokee names for a good deal of places in the Western North Carolina area, including a lot of places directly around Cullowhee. And I also worked remotely with speakers and my professor of Cherokee linguistics, Dr. Sarah Snyder Hopkins, who I worked with for the project. I'm also a major in anthropology and history, and I'm from Chapel Hill.
Great, thanks, Barnes. And so let's go ahead and dive into some questions. So from this group, I'd love to know why you selected the topics for your projects. What inspired you?
I'll go ahead and start. So when we were brainstorming together, Dr. Houston and I, one of the things that we thought was particularly concerning was the concept of sexual re-victimization. You're extremely likely to be re-victimized if you've been re-victimized before, and we were trying to think of what could possibly cause this. What's the root of this? So that's how we came on this topic. We decided that there may be certain behaviors or characteristics that make people more likely to be victimized and maybe even re-victimized. So that's why we came up with this topic, and it's going to be extremely significant if we can figure out what exactly causes this. If we can say, well, this makes you more likely to be re-victimized, not only could we potentially lead to a decrease in sexual assaults, there could also potentially be a decrease in sexual assault re-victimization. So yeah.
Great, thank you, Kat. Very, very relevant. Anybody else on what inspired you to select your topic?
So I selected my topic primarily because it's a great overlap into relatively distinct areas of mathematics, and I have a passion for trying to bring things together and combine different subject areas. In this case, particularly, we combined the areas of algebra and combinatorics into a single project, and we drew heavily from both areas. And doing that is something that drives my interests quite a bit.
And so, Tommy, that's a novel approach, correct?
Yes, I wouldn't say it's not like it's completely unique, but it's certainly not the norm. Generally, there are well-known combinatorial techniques, which we use a lot, and there's algebraic techniques and algebraic problems, but we focused on algebraic techniques to solve a primarily combinatorial problem. And that's the sort of thing I really like to do, to apply things that, you think of different solutions that other people that aren't the norm,
Oh, I'm totally with you. I love that kind of thinking too. Anybody else on the inspiration behind your project?
Our project, the project we ended up doing was our fallback project. We started up with a project that would have allowed us to finish a paper we were working on, but that was impossible for us being not in person, being online. So we had to focus to this project, and that's how it happened. The reason why we chose this one is because it allows us to choose what particle to make, what European complex to use before making it. So we can run calculations and analyze the product without spending money on resources to actually make it.
So, go ahead, Barnes, please.
Oh yeah, sorry. Well, the reason that I started on this project was actually I got started on it about 2 years ago at the sort of request of my professor of archaeology, Dr. Brett Riggs, Sequoia Distinguished. And he actually sort of found these in his own rummagings. These notes, I have them here behind me. They're also in my video. A good deal of stuff. He found them he found them in his own rummagings in the Smithsonian National Archive. Without some sort of thorough investigation of the materials, I mean, that kind of information is going to be sort of, and it's sort of a cliche to say, lost. And at the same time, it's sort of pertinent that we conduct this sort of research now because of the high degree of Cherokee language, you know, the involvement of the Cherokee language. And, you know, as Matt was talking about earlier, the vast majority of speakers of the Cherokee language, there's only less than 200 left in North Carolina, and they're all very elderly. And so being able to work with them is very important. And so for sort of anything where in which working alongside a Cherokee speaker is relevant, it's sort of a more pertinent task. It's not something that really can wait how many years you want to. And also in sort of what the reason in general that we would be doing this is not for the sort of scholarly community, but the real reason that we feel that it is important to do this kind of work is like Matt said again, the sort of efforts of the revitalization project with the language, and also just the revitalization of indigenous culture here in Western North Carolina. And really these are place names that belong to the Cherokee culture, and that it is really in the interests of me and the other people working on the project that modern living Cherokee community and those people can engage and interact and explore those places and the history of those places and the names of those places. You know, because now just about every place name comes from English, or it comes from a very, you know, heavy corruption of an original Cherokee place name. You know, a lot of places around here have Cherokee place names, but they're very, very, very heavily corrupted, you know, like Tuckasegee, Cullowhee, you know, a good deal of place names. And so, yeah, that was sort of my reason for the project.
Well, Barnes, I don't think I ever really realized that you have been working on this project for as long as you have. And it's quite impressive, both you and Matt, in switching that perspective of not just taking and keeping for the scholarly advancement in the discipline, but giving back and interacting with that culture and bringing that life and that diversity back. I think it's very commendable.
Yeah, and oh, sorry, but yeah, that's sort of a big aspect of, you know, anthropological or historical research. You know, particularly in anthropology, as you know, as me and Matt are both trying to accomplish in his work with ethnobotany and my work as well. There's just been a large shift in the field in terms of, I guess, an existential sort of shift of why are we doing this? Are we doing this just to make another book to sit on a shelf somewhere and then someone can read it and think it's cool? Or do we want to really work with and sort of help and you know, engage with real living communities that are tied to this knowledge?
Wonderful, wonderful way of stating that. So let me ask this question to the group. I'd love to explore any of your comments or thoughts that you have about the relationship you formed with your faculty member. And again, for the context of our audience, these students are working intensely over the course of 8 weeks with their faculty mentor. And the faculty mentor is a critical part of this experience. So I'd just love to hear from the students what they thought about forming this special relationship.
I can go. So my faculty member was Dr. Storm, and the relationship, it's interesting because when I wanted to do work, I wanted to do lab work. So it's kind of interesting when, you know, everything gets pushed on to online, that like, how do you talk to each other? I mean, we had weekly Zoom meetings, but overall I'd say it was still a great experience getting to form a bond. I mean, even if it was over line, we still formed, I think, a good faculty student, even if it wasn't face-to-face, it was still, we communicated a ton throughout the semester. It wasn't very like loosely, like maybe 2 weeks or something like that. So it was definitely still a connection. I think that's very important when, you go online with these types of things. You still have to, keep with it, with the interaction between those, doing research or anything like that. You have to keep with making sure you're in contact with your advisor or anyone for that matter.
Great perspective, Charles, and especially trying to bridge that gap, that divide that we have when we're not face to face, and like you said, not getting that opportunity to be in the lab. Others?
So not only did I think I bonded with Dr. Houston quite a bit, but also her daughter, who is the cutest little thing in the world. We Zoomed quite often over the summer, and her daughter was a big part of those Zooms. And there was one day in particular I remember vividly where I had to get a doctor appointment from the daughter, and I had to get a shot through Zoom. It was the funniest thing, and it just like made everything so much better. We were working on some terrible numbers and stats part of thing that just stresses my brain out, and I had to get a nice little doctor appointment from her daughter, and made everything better.
Well, I love how both you and Charles talk about that communication, and then, the forming of a relationship that seems to go even beyond this kind of professor-student dynamic, that you kind of end up seeing people on the human level. Anybody else? Okay, so what was a typical workday like in this experience? And can you briefly describe any initial challenges you faced as you got involved in this day-to-day research experience?
I can answer that. I think I have two very different answers for that. On a macrocosmic scale, the sorts of things that were similar from day to day were heavily influenced. Actually, when we went all online last spring, and we didn't have any resources, couldn't go to the library. SCC's library shut down, the Jackson County Library, restaurants were closed. There was really nowhere to go to work, and I had to do all my schoolwork at home. And it was really difficult. For my mental health, not being able to leave the house, and I'm sure a lot of people almost everybody can relate to that. Having to sleep in the same room that you work in for hours and hours a day just is horrible. So I did a lot of searching and looked for resources that I could have, and I was fortunate enough to be put in touch with Jim and Melanie from the campus home-based ministries here at WCU, and they reached out to me and told me that I was welcome to come there, and I did that every day, Monday through Friday. I got there from 9 a.m. to I think 3 or 4 p.m. When Melanie was there, I came in and I just went down into the basement, and that was my little office for the whole summer. And without that, I would have really struggled to accomplish anything, let alone what we were able to accomplish. And so I wanted, that was great, from their part. And that's on a microcosmic scale, a different answer, I guess, is the fact that every day was different. There was a day when I spent the whole day trying to write code. Went from Python to Octave to C in different languages, trying to, formulate different structures and try to write different functions to test our theories and to see if I could come up with some examples to go on to, try to do that. Another day, I remember the whole day I just spent pacing around the basement in the home-based ministries, just trying to think of how to write a proof, just pacing and thinking and pacing and thinking. And another day I actually contacted Justin, and we spent the better part of 2 days talking about each other's research and seeing if there were ways that we could join our, bounce ideas off each other. Because while there were very distinct research projects, we noticed that there were some areas where maybe they could be related, and we wanted to explore that. And I think that's sort of the nature of research, at least in mathematics, is, you know, every day is not good. The day, a given day isn't going to be the same as the day before. You know, there are so many tools we have and so many different things that we're trying to do that we have to kind of throw everything we have at it. And so you exhaust a complete resource, and then the next day, well, let me just dip into a different pool, you know, and that was the beauty of it, I thought.
Well, I think you articulated that beautifully too, and just that personal perspective means so much, especially within the context of our current reality in this pandemic, and how you were able to persevere and overcome that challenge is really commendable, really commendable. Anybody else?
I'd like to share. So at the very beginning of the project, that's when I got the most anxious, because we started out with one computer software to do our calculations, and it was not behaving the way we wanted it to. So we had to change to a different one, and this was around when the first report was due, and we hadn't started any calculations yet, so I was very worried about it. But thanks to IT, we were able to get this new program running, and they made our VM, since it requires a lot of computing power and my computer cannot handle that. They made us the VM, and they were very helpful. We couldn't have done it without them. On a day-to-day basis, there was not much for me to do once we started the calculations. They take about 2 hours to run, during which I can do anything because the computer is running. Before that, I would just go over literature search, and towards the last part, it was mostly data analysis.
Great, and I just want to make the comment too, Mateo, that you ventured into this area never having thought that you would before. So it sounds like you really learned the ins and outs of online computational chemistry. Very commendable. Okay, so the next question that I have for the group is, at what point in the summer experience did you feel like you became an expert in your topic or your project?
If I go, I felt like an expert when I got on my computer and I had all the tabs up already. And if I close a tab and I reopen that website, I could navigate it in under like, you know, a few seconds. I could get to where I was going, where at the start of the semester, it was like, how do I use this? Or what program am I using? A new program. So I felt like an expert in at least somewhat of an expert, at least navigating the programs and understanding what they were trying to tell me in those programs. Towards the end of the program, but I at least feel confident now in navigating those, especially since I'm still doing research for that.
And so you're still using the technology and the software, correct?
Yes, to an extent, it's new programs, but still, like all the information that the other programs are conveying, it's still very prevalent in the other programs. I mean, bioinformatics, I mean, they use the same linguistic type of thing, so it's very easy to transfer over that language and understanding.
Great.
I was just becoming an expert on programs, because there's every different thing we want to do is finding different programs. So he's finding more that I didn't even know it existed to answer some of these questions. So that's part of the research aspect for this kind of research too, is every program's different. So you have to teach yourself how to teach yourself all these things.
Which I gotta say, always translates great on a resume, right? Anybody else on when you felt like you became an expert in your topic? Okay, well, I'm looking at about 4:40, and so I do want to pose the opportunity for questions from the audience. I don't know if we have any generated from chat right now, Jill. I still have a couple questions in the bag if we need to fall back on those, but I'd certainly like to leave the last 5 minutes of our proceedings open to the audience.
Sure. Okay, we have a question from the chat. How has this experience changed your trajectory as a student? And what would you tell a new WCU student about undergraduate research?
For me, at least, my trajectory has added a new path, we'll say. I mean, a year ago, you would have asked me if I had wanted to research anything. I would have said, you know what? I'm more of I'm going to take a practitioner kind of approach to this thing. I would have never thought that I could have been so involved and invested in research. And I've always been planning on going to graduate school, but this has for sure added a new twist to that. I think I may be continuing this research or similar research for a long time, which was not something that I had planned on, but I'm interested in it and I'm passionate about it. And that's what I would tell a new student. Don't research something that you're not passionate about. Do what you find interesting, because ultimately it's not going to do as much for you if you're not interested in it. And personally, I believe that you will be way more productive if it's something that you are interested in, if you're passionate about, if you believe in it. What's the point otherwise? I mean, so that would be my advice. Care about it.
Anybody else?
So this was actually my second large-scale research project here at WCU, and now I'm in the process of trying to start up a third research project with CLU overseeing it. Actually, last year we were scheduled. Me and Justin were actually for the project before this. So this might not be SURP specific, but it goes into the context of undergraduate research, and SURP certainly is an extension of that. We had planned on speaking at Southwestern Community College's Lunch and Learn series, which is a thing that before pandemic they would hold every other month, where they would have speakers come in, and we were actually planning on going there and speaking on undergraduate research and trying to talk about our experience in that to community college and high school students. And the long and short of it, we had a whole thing planned before it unfortunately got canceled. But the long and short of it is, I've learned more. I don't know about the rest of the people in this program, but I've learned more from research than I ever learned in any class. I really feel like, I learn a lot from classes. I feel like I'm the kind of student who retains information fairly well. I work hard. I always challenge myself to look at other resources and read the book before I go to class. And I feel like I do a fairly good job of learning in class, in a classroom setting, but it's nothing compared to what you learn doing research. The amount I learned in the SURP program is phenomenal. And like you were saying, in an 8-week period, I learned more than any class has ever taught me in 16 weeks. And that's, a huge thing. I think every student should consider, if they have the opportunity and the resources to do it, to try to do some sort of undergraduate research.
Anybody else?
So during this, I always knew I wanted to go into research, and I always thought I would like it. And SURP confirmed it. I do like research, and I do want to continue. One advice I would give to a new WCU student is get out there. If you're interested in research, ask your professors as soon as possible, because time is the essence in research. It takes a lot of time, and the sooner you start, the better.
Well, I truly appreciate those ringing endorsements. I would, again, 100% agree with all of your comments. I see some coming through the chat of the participants in agreement with that. Just well stated and well articulated. Jill, do we have any other questions from the whole group chat?
Not right now.
Can I pose to the audience to unmute and ask questions at this time? And with the, it's 4:45, so I know we're ready to skedaddle on a Friday afternoon, but certainly pose questions open to all participants of our SURP program, not just our individual panelists per group. So.
I would just like to say it's really inspiring, and I'll echo the comments that we see on chat. So inspiring to see these very complex research endeavors being undertaken by the students and their faculty advisors, and under very challenging circumstances. And I didn't understand half of the topics that were presented, but I'm not supposed to. And I congratulate each of you on that.
Well, thank you so much for that comment. And for those of you out there, I would encourage you to explore the website that we have provided, where we can expand your understanding and accessibility of these projects. Jill, if you wouldn't mind maybe typing in to the chat the go.wcu.edu/SURP. And there you can watch their videos. They made videos. I mean, in 3 weeks' time, they recorded these amazing videos and made these beautiful posters to present this information to a wide audience, so that y'all can learn just like me. I'm with you, Andy. I'm trying to learn and understand these topics too. And so with that, again, just any last call for any questions for the group?
I just want you to say that website one more time, so I can't type as fast as you talk. go.wcu.edu/SURP.
You got it. Go.wcu.edu/SURP.
I also wanted to thank you, Clue, for all the work you've done with the students, because you've put so much time into them and really helped us as mentoring them in ways that we couldn't have done otherwise. And so there's just so much valuable things that we get out of this besides just the research that you've done. So really appreciate your flexibility in helping us all transition and still providing such valuable service for them.
Amanda, you humble me. Thank you. It has been my distinct honor and pleasure to work with all of you and these students. They're the ones who've done the magic. All right, and with that, I will end our proceedings for this year's 2020 Summer Undergraduate Research Program. Again, thank you so very much for joining us. I will have this finalized and recorded and available on the website in the coming days, so you can listen to it if you'd like to again. With that, I bid you farewell and a wonderful weekend.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Clue.
Thank you.